My friend pulled my false eyelashes off at prom in front of everyone because she was jealous that my date was more attractive than hers. We were standing near the stage waiting for results when Courtney reached over and ripped both my false eyelashes off in one quick motion, taking some of my real lashes with them and leaving my eyes red and swollen. She held them up like a trophy and announced to everyone that I was wearing fake everything, just like my fake personality and fake friendship that made people think I was nice. She said at least her face was real, even if it wasn't as pretty as my artificial one that required glue and lies to look presentable. Everyone stared as my eyes started tearing from the pain, and my carefully done makeup began running down my face that had taken 4 hours to perfect at the salon. Courtney laughed and told my date Kevin that he'd been deceived by false advertising and should check what else was fake before getting too attached. She actually stuck my eyelashes on her dress like a decoration, and said she'd wear them as a reminder of when she exposed me for being artificial. The DJ had stopped the music and everyone was watching as Courtney continued her speech about how I'd probably stuffed my bra and worn shapewear to trick Kevin into thinking I had a good body. She said my hair extensions were obvious, and my nail were press-ons, and even my tan was sprayed on because nothing about me was authentic. Kevin stood there shocked while Courtney told him he could do better with someone genuine like her friend Brittany, who'd had a crush on him all year. When I tried to cover my face and leave, Courtney grabbed my arm and said I couldn't run away from the truth about being a fake person who needed accessories to be acceptable. She told everyone about how I'd studied YouTube tutorials for months to learn makeup, because my natural face was too plain for anyone to notice. She said I'd spent $800 on my prom look because without money I was nothing special, and she was doing everyone a favor by showing them the truth. The prom coordinator tried to intervene, but Courtney said she was just being honest, and real friends told each other the truth even when it hurt. But I knew things about Courtney that she'd never wanted anyone to discover, including the fact that she'd been copying my homework for 2 years and claiming my grades as proof of her intelligence. The next day, I went to our teachers with evidence of her cheating, including her copied assignments with my exact wrong answers and misspellings that proved she hadn't done any work herself. The academic review board discovered Courtney had cheated her way through high school, and her college acceptance was revoked when they were notified. Her parents were devastated to learn their smart daughter was actually a cheater who'd stolen others' work for years. But that was just the beginning because I also knew Courtney had been lying about her family's wealth and her father's job to seem more impressive than she was. Her father wasn't a surgeon like she claimed, but worked at a medical supply warehouse, and they lived in a small apartment, not the mansion she described. I made sure this information reached the country club crowd she'd been trying to impress all year, who were disgusted by her deception. Courtney had also been spreading rumors about other girls to eliminate competition for popularity, and I had receipts of her admitting to making up stories about pregnancies and eating disorders. I gave these to everyone she'd hurt, and they all turned against her for destroying their reputations with lies while pretending to be their friend. The girl she'd called pregnant confronted her in the cafeteria and dumped chocolate milk on Courtney's head. The cheerleading squad she'd tried to join rejected her for being a bully who created drama, and the yearbook committee removed her from their pages, saying they only featured authentic students, not frauds. 3 weeks later, Courtney showed up at my graduation party uninvited, walking straight up to Kevin and loudly announcing that she'd been sexting with him the entire time we'd been dating after prom, and had the screenshots to prove it. She pulled out her phone and started reading his messages about how he was only with me to make Courtney jealous, how the prom incident had been staged between them to humiliate me, and how they'd been laughing about my crying face together every night. Then she turned to me with a smile and said Kevin had told her something else about prom night. Her phone glows in her hand while she scrolls through something that makes her smile grow wider. Kevin shifts his weight from one foot to the other and stares at the floor instead of looking at either of us. My stomach twists because I recognize that look on Courtney's face, the same expression she had right before she grabbed my eyelashes at prom. The music from the speakers fades into background noise as everyone in the living room stops their conversations and turns to watch us. Someone near the kitchen whispers something I can't hear, but the tone carries enough that I know they're already guessing what comes next. Courtney's finger swipes across her screen one more time before she holds the phone out toward me with her arm fully extended. I step closer even though every part of me wants to run out the front door and never look back. The text message fills the screen with Kevin's name at the top, and a timestamp from the morning after prom when I was still crying in my bedroom. My hands shake as I take the phone from her and read his words about how the plan worked perfectly, and my crying face exceeded their expectations. He describes the exact moment my eyelashes came off as beautiful, and says watching me try to hold back tears while everyone stared made the whole setup worth the effort. The next message thanks Courtney for her performance and promises to make sure I never suspect they coordinated everything together. Kevin reaches for the phone, but Courtney pulls it back and tells me there's more I need to see before she explains the rest. I look up from the screen and stare at Kevin while my brain tries to make sense of what I just read. The question comes out quieter than I intended when I ask if he really helped plan what happened at prom. He opens his mouth and starts to say, "It's not what it looks like," but the words die halfway through the sentence. His eyes drop to the carpet and stay there while I wait for him to deny it, or explain or do anything besides stand there looking guilty. The betrayal cuts deeper than anything Courtney did because I trusted Kevin completely after prom and let him hold me while I cried about the humiliation. He watched me break down that night and every night after, knowing he caused it and planned every word Courtney said. My chest feels tight like someone wrapped rubber bands around my ribs and keeps adding more with each breath I take. Courtney sets her phone on the coffee table and crosses her arms while she watches Kevin refuse to meet my eyes. She tells me that Kevin came to her 2 weeks before prom with the whole eyelash idea already formed in his head. He wanted to teach me a lesson about being fake and focusing too much on my appearance and popularity. She admits she went along with it because she was jealous of my relationship with Kevin and angry about things I'd said months earlier. But Kevin planned everything down to the exact words she should use and the timing of when to grab my eyelashes near the stage. I feel like the entire month since prom has been built on lies, and I don't know what was real anymore. Kevin finally speaks and says I needed to be taken down a few levels because I was too focused on how I looked. He claims he was trying to help me become a better person by showing me how shallow my priorities were. His voice stays calm like he's explaining homework instead of admitting he orchestrated my public humiliation. The justification makes anger flood through my body until my hands clench into fists at my sides. He's acting like ripping my eyelashes off in front of everyone was some kind of favor instead of cruel manipulation designed to hurt me. I ask Courtney what else she meant about prom night and what other secret Kevin told her. She looks at Kevin like she's waiting for permission to continue, and he shakes his head with his eyes going wide. But she ignores him and tells me that Kevin didn't just plan the eyelash incident. He also set up everything that happened after to make sure I would completely destroy her life in revenge. The room tilts sideways, and I grab the back of a chair to steady myself while she keeps talking. Courtney explains that Kevin fed me information about her cheating and lying over the weeks after prom. He made sure I found evidence he had carefully arranged in places I would look. Every conversation where he supported my anger and encouraged me to expose the truth was actually him pushing me to ruin her college acceptance and social life. She says Kevin wanted revenge on her for rejecting him freshman year, and he never forgot that hurt. I was his weapon to destroy her while making me think I was getting justice for myself. The words keep coming, but my brain can't process them fast enough to understand the full scope of what Kevin did. He used my pain and humiliation to turn me into someone who would systematically tear apart another person's future. Every piece of evidence I found and every revenge move I made was part of his plan all along. Kevin moves toward the front door, but Bryson steps in front of it and blocks his path. Bryson tells him that his best friend needs to own what he did instead of running away like a coward. The disgust in Bryson's voice surprises me because I always thought they were close. Bryson looks at everyone watching and says Kevin bragged about manipulating both of us and called it his masterpiece of social engineering. He describes how Kevin would laugh about our fights and plan the next piece of information to feed me. I realized that every time Kevin held me and told me I deserved better and supported my revenge campaign, he was actually just enjoying watching his plan work perfectly. The support I thought was love was really him getting entertainment from the destruction he caused. My stomach lurches and I run toward the bathroom with my hand over my mouth. I barely make it to the toilet before throwing up everything I ate at the party. Melody appears beside me and pulls my hair back while I heave again. She tells me this isn't my fault, and Kevin manipulated me when I was hurt and vulnerable. But I know I made choices to destroy Courtney's life even if Kevin pushed me toward it. I'm the one who went to the teachers with evidence and spread information about her family and gave receipts to everyone she hurt. Kevin might have arranged the pieces, but I'm the one who actually did everything. The bathroom floor feels cold against my knees, and I can hear voices arguing in the living room through the door. When I come back out, Courtney is crying and showing people more texts where Kevin coached her on exactly what to say at prom. He wrote out her whole speech about fake eyelashes and artificial personality word for word. The messages include timing instructions about waiting until we were near the stage and making sure the DJ had stopped the music. Kevin is sitting on the couch with his head in his hands while people yell at him about being a psychopath and a manipulator. Someone calls him sick and twisted, and another person says they always knew something was wrong with him. Melody guides me to a chair and brings me water while I try to process everything that just got revealed in the last 15 minutes. Harmony touches my elbow and guides me away from the group toward the kitchen. She glances back at Courtney and Kevin before looking at me with this expression I can't quite read. She tells me she suspected something was wrong weeks ago, when Kevin kept pushing me to go after Courtney harder. I stare at her because this information feels like it's coming too late to matter. She explains that every time I started feeling guilty about what I was doing to Courtney, Kevin would show up with some new piece of information that made me angry all over again. Harmony says she noticed the pattern but didn't know if she was reading too much into it. I ask why she didn't say anything if she thought Kevin was manipulating me. She looks down at the kitchen counter and admits she wasn't completely sure and didn't want to make things worse if she was wrong about him. The excuse sounds weak now that everything's out in the open. I tell her I wish she'd trusted her gut because maybe I wouldn't have destroyed Courtney's entire life if someone had warned me. Harmony reaches for my hand, but I pull away because I'm too angry at everyone right now to accept comfort. The party host walks into the living room and raises his voice over everyone's conversations. He tells most people they need to leave now, and only me, Courtney, Kevin, and a few close friends should stay to figure this out. People start gathering their stuff slowly, clearly not wanting to miss any more drama. I watch them pull out their phones as they head toward the door, fingers already typing on their screens. The host has to physically push some people out and lock the door behind them. I know by tomorrow morning the entire school will have heard some version of what happened tonight. Everyone will know that Kevin played both Courtney and me like we were pieces in some sick game he was running. They'll know I destroyed someone's college acceptance and family trust because I was too hurt and angry to see I was used as a weapon. The room feels smaller now with just 8 of us left sitting in this uncomfortable silence. Courtney and I end up on opposite ends of the couch without planning it that way. She's wiping tears off her face with her sleeve, and I realize I'm crying too. Kevin sits in the chair across from us and starts talking about how he did care about me, but also needed justice for what Courtney did to him years ago. His voice sounds defensive, like he's trying to convince himself as much as us. He says Courtney hurt him badly freshman year and he never got over it. I watch him try to justify turning me into his revenge weapon and feel sick. This person I thought I knew and loved is actually a stranger who used my pain for his own purposes. Kevin reaches toward me, but I lean away from him. He talks about how Courtney rejected him and made him feel worthless. I realize I never really knew him at all because the person I fell for was just a performance designed to manipulate me. Bryson stands up and walks over to where Kevin is sitting. He tells us that Kevin did the same thing with his ex-girlfriend 2 years ago. My stomach drops as Bryson explains how Kevin manipulated that girl into fighting with another student over something he'd orchestrated. Bryson says Kevin gets some kind of satisfaction from controlling people and watching them destroy each other while he acts supportive and innocent. I feel like I'm going to throw up again knowing I fell for the exact same pattern that hurt someone else before me. Bryson looks at Kevin with disgust and says he should have warned me, but didn't think Kevin would take it this far. I realize Kevin has been doing this for years, finding hurt people and turning them into weapons against whoever he wants to punish. The thought that I hurt Courtney, so badly because I was too emotional to see what was happening, makes me want to disappear. Courtney looks at me and asks if I knew that she and Kevin dated briefly freshman year. I shake my head because this is completely new information. She explains that they went out for about 6 weeks before Kevin told her she wasn't pretty enough for him and moved on to someone else. The revenge plot suddenly makes perfect sense as Kevin's long game to hurt her. Courtney says Kevin's rejection is what started her obsession with appearance and competing with other girls. She thought if she could just be prettier or more popular, then she'd be good enough. I feel this wave of sadness because Kevin planted the seeds of her insecurity 4 years ago, and then used those same wounds to manipulate both of us. Courtney wipes her eyes and says she knows it doesn't excuse what she did at prom, but at least now she understands where all that anger really came from. I think about all the times Kevin told me I was too focused on my looks and popularity. Those were probably the exact same things he said to Courtney to make her feel insecure. Melody walks over and sits between Courtney and me on the couch. She points out that Kevin started dating me right after the prom incident, timing it perfectly to position himself as my supporter when I was vulnerable. Kevin creates wounds in people and then comes back later to use those wounds for control. He told Courtney she wasn't pretty enough, and then watched her become obsessed with appearance. He watched me get humiliated at prom, and then swooped in to support me while secretly feeding my desire for revenge. Melody says Kevin is like a farmer planting seeds and waiting years for them to grow into exactly what he needs. The comparison makes me feel used and stupid for not seeing it. Kevin finally stops trying to defend himself and admits he planned everything from the beginning. But then he says that Courtney and I both made our own choices to go along with it. He insists that Courtney chose to rip my eyelashes off at prom, and I chose to destroy her college future, so we're all equally guilty of hurting people. His refusal to take real responsibility for manipulating us makes me angrier than anything else that's happened tonight. I stand up and tell him he's not the victim here just because we made the final choices. Kevin set up every piece and pushed us toward those choices when we were hurt and vulnerable. He used our pain and insecurity as tools to get what he wanted. Kevin tries to argue that he didn't force us to do anything, but Bryson tells him to shut up because no one wants to hear more excuses. Courtney and I look at each other across the couch and something changes between us. I see recognition in her face that we were both victims of the same person's manipulation. She says she's sorry for what she did at prom even though Kevin planned it, because she still chose to hurt me that badly in front of everyone. Her apology sounds genuine and broken. I tell her I'm sorry for ruining her college acceptance and making sure everyone knew about her family's real situation. I explain that Kevin manipulating me doesn't erase the actual damage I caused to her life. We both sit there crying because we hurt each other so badly, and Kevin got exactly what he wanted. Courtney reaches across the couch and I take her hand, even though touching her feels strange after months of being enemies. Harmony suggests we all need time to process everything before making any decisions about what happens next. Bryson agrees and says Kevin needs to leave right now before things get worse. Kevin stands up and tries to apologize again, but I tell him to get out and never contact me again. I say I can't stand to look at him knowing what he did to both of us. Kevin walks toward the door slowly like he's waiting for someone to stop him. No one does. He turns back one more time and opens his mouth, but Bryson physically pushes him out the door. We hear Kevin's car start in the driveway and then drive away. The house feels quieter without him, but also heavier with everything we now have to deal with. The remaining people sit in shocked silence, trying to understand how Kevin manipulated so many people so completely. Camilla breaks the quiet by saying she always thought Kevin was too perfect and too supportive. She describes how he seemed like he was performing the role of good boyfriend instead of actually being genuine. I wish I'd noticed that before I let him turn me into someone who could systematically destroy another person's life. Melody puts her arm around me and I lean against her shoulder. Courtney sits on the other end of the couch staring at her phone where Kevin's messages are still pulled up. The party host brings us water and says we can stay as long as we need to figure things out. I don't know how to figure out something this broken. Courtney stands up from the couch and catches my eye. She asks if we can talk privately because there are things she needs to say without everyone else listening. I nod and follow her through the house to the backyard, where the party host has string lights hanging between trees. The night air feels cool after being inside with so many people, and I wrap my arms around myself. Courtney sits on the edge of a wooden bench and I sit on the opposite end with space between us. She stares at her hands for a long moment before she starts talking about how losing her college acceptance destroyed everything. She says her parents looked at her differently after they found out about the cheating, like they didn't know who she was anymore. They questioned every good grade she'd ever brought home and wondered if any of her achievements were real. She tells me she stopped believing in herself too, because if she couldn't earn things honestly, then maybe she really was worthless, like everyone said. Her voice breaks when she describes watching her mom cry over the rejection letter and knowing it was her own fault for cheating in the first place. I listen without interrupting because I can hear the pain in every word. Then Courtney looks at me and says she needs to know how the prom incident affected me beyond just the obvious humiliation. I take a breath and tell her that having my eyelashes ripped off in front of everyone made me feel completely worthless. I explain that standing there with my makeup running and everyone staring made me question if maybe she was right about me being fake and unacceptable without all the beauty stuff. I spent weeks avoiding mirrors and stopped wearing any makeup at all because I was terrified of someone else calling me artificial. The humiliation didn't end when prom ended because I carried it with me every single day afterward. Courtney wipes her eyes and we sit in silence for a minute. Then she says something that surprises me. She tells me that Kevin's manipulation doesn't erase the real harm we caused each other even if he orchestrated everything. She says she made a choice to publicly humiliate me at prom because she was jealous of how I looked and how Kevin paid attention to me. She admits that regardless of Kevin planning it, she still chose to grab my eyelashes and make that speech and hurt me in front of everyone. Her taking responsibility makes me realize I need to do the same thing. I tell Courtney that I made a choice to systematically destroy her future because I wanted revenge for what she did to me. I explain that even though Kevin fed me information and encouraged me, I'm the one who actually went to the teachers and spread information about her family and gave receipts to the girls she hurt. Kevin manipulating me doesn't erase the actual damage I caused to her life and her family. We both sit there understanding that we hurt each other badly, and we can't blame everything on Kevin even though he set things up. I ask Courtney if she really was copying my homework for 2 years, or if Kevin somehow set that up too. She looks embarrassed but says the homework copying was completely real, and she's deeply ashamed of it. She explains that she started copying sophomore year when she was struggling in math, and it became a habit she couldn't break. But she never told anyone about the cheating, so she doesn't understand how Kevin knew about it. She says Kevin must have been watching her for years and waiting to use that information against her. The thought of Kevin observing her that carefully for that long makes both of us uncomfortable. Courtney reveals something else that makes the situation even worse. She says Kevin also knew about her family's real financial situation because he'd been to her apartment freshman year. She trusted him with that secret during their brief relationship when they dated for like 3 weeks. She never imagined he would save that information to use against her almost 3 years later. I realized that Kevin has been collecting information and planning this revenge for almost 4 years. He dated Courtney freshman year and learned her secrets. He watched her cheat on homework and kept evidence. He learned about my insecurities and beauty routines. Then he set up the perfect situation to make us destroy each other while he watched. The calculation involved in his plan makes me feel sick. We talk about how Kevin positioned himself perfectly after prom to become my boyfriend. Courtney says he did something similar to her before prom by gradually making comments about how fake I was. He would mention my extensions or my makeup in casual conversation until she was angry enough to do something dramatic. He told her that girls like me who relied on artificial beauty were deceiving everyone, and someone should expose the truth. By the time prom came around, Courtney was so worked up about my fakeness that ripping off my eyelashes felt justified. I realized Kevin did the same thing to me after prom by slowly feeding me reasons to escalate my revenge. He would bring up Courtney's lies and suggest ways to expose her. He made destroying her feel like justice instead of cruelty. Kevin played us both by finding our existing insecurities and jealousies, and then pushing us to act on them. I tell Courtney something that's hard to admit out loud. I say that I genuinely believed I was getting justice for what she did to me, and the revenge actually felt good until right now. Seeing her college acceptance get revoked felt satisfying because I thought she deserved it for humiliating me. Watching people turn against her felt like proof that I was right to expose her lies. The revenge felt justified every single step of the way, until I learned Kevin had manipulated everything. Courtney nods and says she genuinely believed she was exposing my fakeness at prom, and the humiliation felt justified at the time. She thought she was doing everyone a favor by showing them the truth about me. She says the humiliation felt right, until she saw how far I took the revenge and realized what she'd started. We both got caught up in hurting each other while Kevin watched and encouraged it from the sidelines. The backyard door opens and Melody steps outside looking worried. She walks over and tells us that people are starting to post about what happened on social media. She shows us her phone where multiple people have already shared versions of the story about Kevin manipulating us. Kevin is already trying to control the narrative by claiming we're both lying about him to cover our own drama. He posted that Courtney and I are making up the manipulation story because we're embarrassed about our public fight. Some people are believing him and commenting that we're just trying to shift blame. I feel exhausted by the thought of more public conflict and drama. I tell Melody I just want everything to stop because I can't handle fighting about this online too. Courtney looks at her own phone and sees similar posts appearing. She says we need to tell our parents what really happened before they see distorted versions online. She's terrified because her parents are already disappointed about the college situation, and this will make everything worse. They're going to find out she was manipulated into the prom incident, and that Kevin used her secrets against her. I feel scared too because my parents thought Kevin was perfect and trusted him completely. They encouraged our relationship and praised him for being so supportive after prom. Finding out he manipulated me into destroying someone's life will devastate them. Courtney and I exchange phone numbers for the first time in months and agree to talk tomorrow after we've both dealt with our families. As she walks toward the front of the house to leave, she turns back and looks at me. She says she knows we can't be friends again after everything that happened between us. Too much damage was done and too many cruel things were said and done. But maybe we don't have to be enemies either now that we understand what really happened. I nod because I feel exactly the same way even though I don't know what that middle ground looks like. We're not friends, but we're not enemies, and we're both trying to deal with being victims and villains at the same time. Melody drives me home and I tell her everything that happened in the backyard with Courtney. I admit that the revenge felt good when I thought it was justified, and I enjoyed watching Courtney lose everything. Melody doesn't try to make me feel better about it. She says Kevin is responsible for manipulating both of us, but I'm also responsible for my choices to keep escalating the revenge. She points out that Kevin gave me information, but I'm the one who decided what to do with it. Her honesty helps more than comfort would because I need to face what I actually did, instead of blaming everything on Kevin's manipulation. My parents are sitting in the living room when I walk through the front door, both of them staring at their phones with expressions I've never seen before. Mom looks up first, and her face shows something between worry and disappointment that makes my stomach hurt. Dad sets his phone down on the coffee table and asks me to sit down because they need to talk about what happened tonight. I drop onto the couch and realize they've already seen everything, probably multiple versions from different people at the party. Mom starts by asking if I'm okay, which feels strange because I don't know how to answer that question anymore. I tell them the whole story from the very beginning, starting with the prom incident that I'd barely mentioned before because I was too embarrassed. I describe how Courtney ripped my eyelashes off in front of everyone and said those things about me being fake and artificial. I explain how Kevin appeared right after, seeming so supportive and understanding, telling me I deserved better treatment. I walk them through every step of the revenge, admitting that I went to teachers with evidence of Courtney's cheating and spread information about her family's real situation. Mom's face gets paler as I describe how I gave receipts of Courtney's rumors to the girls she'd hurt. Dad sits forward when I tell them about the college acceptance being revoked and Courtney's parents finding out everything. Then I explain what happened tonight, how Courtney showed everyone the texts proving Kevin planned the whole prom incident with her. I show them screenshots on my phone where Kevin coached Courtney on exactly what to say and when to rip my eyelashes off. Mom reads Kevin's messages about using me as a weapon to destroy Courtney's life for rejecting him years ago. Dad takes the phone and scrolls through more texts, shaking his head slowly like he can't believe what he's seeing. They're shocked about Kevin's manipulation, but I can tell they're also worried about how far I took everything. Mom finally asks why I didn't come to them when Courtney humiliated me at prom instead of handling it myself. I try to explain that I felt embarrassed and angry and didn't want them to see me like that, crying with my makeup running. I tell them Kevin was right there saying I had every right to get revenge and that Courtney deserved consequences. Dad interrupts and says Kevin took advantage of my hurt feelings to use me for his own purposes. He points out that even though Kevin manipulated the situation, I still made choices that seriously damaged another person's life. Mom adds that I could have come to them at any point during the revenge campaign, but I kept going instead. I admit I knew what I was doing was extreme, but it felt justified because of how badly Courtney hurt me. Dad says that's exactly what Kevin counted on, me being too angry and hurt to think clearly about what I was doing. We stay up late talking about what happens next and whether I need to try fixing any of the damage I caused. Mom says some things can't be unfixed no matter what I do, like Courtney's lost college acceptance and her parents' broken trust. Dad suggests I might be able to help with other parts, like talking to the girls Courtney spread rumors about and explaining the manipulation. I feel completely overwhelmed by the idea of trying to repair something I worked so hard to destroy over weeks. Mom asks if I understand that Kevin manipulated both Courtney and me, turning us against each other for his own entertainment. I nod because I do understand it now, but that doesn't change what actually happened between us. Dad says I need to take responsibility for my choices, even while recognizing Kevin's role in pushing me toward them. We talk about whether I should try to contact Courtney or give her space to process everything with her own family. Mom thinks we both need time before trying to figure out any kind of relationship going forward. Dad agrees and says the most important thing right now is me understanding how I let anger control my actions. I tell them I do understand, and I feel sick about what I did to Courtney's college future. Mom says that feeling is important because it means I recognize the harm I caused regardless of Kevin's manipulation. We finally go to bed around 3 a.m. after talking through everything multiple times. The next morning, my phone is already full of messages when I wake up, dozens of texts from people at the school taking sides. Some people think Kevin is completely at fault, and Courtney and I were both his victims who couldn't help what happened. Others think Courtney and I are equally guilty for letting ourselves be manipulated into hurting each other so badly. A few people say I'm worse than Kevin because I actually destroyed Courtney's life while he just planned it. Someone created a group chat called Truth About Kevin, where people are sharing their own stories about him. I scroll through messages from classmates I barely know, all of them offering opinions about my life and choices. One girl writes that she always knew Kevin was manipulative, but nobody would have believed her before now. A guy from my math class says Courtney got what she deserved for being a bully, even if Kevin orchestrated it. 3 different people send me links to posts on various social media platforms discussing the whole situation. I turn off my phone because I can't handle reading more opinions and judgments about everything that happened. My head hurts from lack of sleep, and my eyes feel swollen from crying last night with my parents. Around noon, Courtney texts me, which surprises me because I figured she'd never want to talk to me again. She says her parents are devastated about Kevin's manipulation, but also really angry that she went along with humiliating me. They're questioning whether they can trust her judgment about anything now after she let herself be used like that. She writes that the hardest part is knowing she gave Kevin exactly what he wanted by destroying our friendship. She says her mom keeps asking why she didn't come to them instead of listening to Kevin's plan. Her dad apparently called Kevin's parents last night and had a long conversation about what their son did. Courtney adds that her parents are also still upset about the cheating and lying, so she's dealing with multiple levels of disappointment. She asks if my parents are mad at me too, or if they understand the manipulation better. I text back that my parents are worried and disappointed, but trying to be supportive while also making sure I understand my own responsibility. We exchange a few more messages about how strange everything feels now that we know the truth. Monday morning, my parents drive me to the school early because they scheduled a meeting with the guidance counselor. We sit in the waiting area outside Hadrian Rush's office until he opens the door and invites us in. My parents insisted I talk to someone at the school who understands teenage behavior and manipulation. Hadrian looks tired, like maybe other families have been coming in to talk about Kevin too. He starts by asking how I'm doing after everything that happened at the graduation party. I tell him I'm confused and angry and guilty all at the same time. My mom explains that we spent hours talking through the situation, but she wants professional input about how to handle things going forward. Hadrian nods and says, Kevin's behavior shows signs of serious manipulation and control issues that go way beyond normal teenage drama. He pulls out a folder and shows us some information about manipulative personality patterns in adolescence. Dad asks if the school knew about Kevin's behavior before now. Hadrian admits they had some concerns, but nothing concrete enough to act on until multiple students came forward this weekend. He looks at me directly and asks if I want to file any kind of formal complaint about Kevin's manipulation. I'm not sure what that would accomplish at this point since graduation is in 2 weeks. Hadrian explains that a formal complaint would go in Kevin's permanent record and might affect his college situation. Mom and Dad look at me waiting for my decision. I think about Kevin losing his college acceptance like Courtney did, but then remember he planned all of this deliberately over years. Hadrian tells us that several other students have come forward with stories about Kevin manipulating situations between friends over the past few years. He describes a pattern where Kevin creates conflict between people and then plays the supportive friend to whoever seems most useful. Apparently his pattern of starting drama and then acting innocent goes back to sophomore year at least. One girl reported that Kevin convinced her to break up with her boyfriend by feeding her false information about cheating. Another student says Kevin spread a rumor and then helped him figure out who started it, never admitting his own role. I feel stupid for not seeing any of this before I let Kevin use me against Courtney. Hadrian says manipulative people are really good at hiding their true intentions until it's too late to stop the damage. He adds that Kevin specifically targets people who are already hurt or vulnerable, which makes the manipulation more effective. Dad asks what happens to Kevin now that multiple students have reported his behavior. Hadrian explains that the school is investigating, but Kevin hasn't technically broken any rules that would result in suspension. Mom looks frustrated and asks how manipulating students into destroying each other isn't against school policy. Hadrian agrees it should be, but says the current handbook doesn't specifically address this type of psychological manipulation. We leave his office with information about teen manipulation and a plan to check in again next week. That afternoon, Bryson texts me asking if we can talk about Kevin. We meet in the library after school where it's mostly empty except for a few students studying. Bryson sits down across from me and immediately apologizes for not saying something sooner about Kevin's behavior. He explains that he noticed the pattern over the years but convinced himself it wasn't that serious. He describes watching Kevin manipulate small situations between friends and always being there to comfort whoever got hurt. Bryson says he thought Kevin just liked drama and attention, not that he was deliberately destroying people's lives. I ask why he finally spoke up at the graduation party, instead of staying quiet like before. He admits that seeing what happened to Courtney and me was too extreme to ignore anymore. Bryson shows me his phone where he's been collecting screenshots of Kevin bragging about his manipulations to other people. There are messages where Kevin laughs about getting me to ruin Courtney's college acceptance and calls it his best work. Other texts show Kevin planning future manipulations with different students as targets. I feel sick reading his words about enjoying the control he has over people's emotions and choices. Bryson says he's giving all of this to Hadrian Rush for the school investigation. I appreciate his honesty, but also feel frustrated that people saw warning signs and didn't speak up before now. Bryson explains that Kevin was really good at making everything seem like coincidence or natural drama, rather than deliberate planning. He says even now, some of their mutual friends don't believe Kevin did anything wrong. We talk for another hour about all the situations Bryson witnessed where Kevin manipulated outcomes while pretending to be helpful. A week passes with everyone at the school treating Courtney and me like we're either fragile or dangerous. I run into her at the coffee shop near school on Saturday afternoon. We both freeze when we see each other, then awkwardly decide to sit together instead of pretending we didn't notice. She orders a vanilla latte and I get my usual iced coffee, then we sit at a corner table away from other customers. Courtney starts by saying how weird the last few days of senior year have been with everyone staring and whispering. I agree and tell her about teachers pulling me aside constantly to ask if I'm okay. She laughs a little and says the same thing keeps happening to her, like adults think we're going to break down any second. We talk about graduation coming up and whether it will be awkward seeing Kevin there. Courtney says she heard he's planning to skip the ceremony and just pick up his diploma later. I feel relieved because I don't think I can handle being in the same room with him yet. She tells me about her college appeal process and how she's been trying to explain the manipulation situation to the admissions office. The school is hesitant to reverse their decision even with all the new information about Kevin's role. Courtney says even if Kevin manipulated everything, she still actually cheated on homework for 2 years before any of this started. I don't know how to help because my revenge made sure the evidence was thorough and convincing to the academic review board. She shows me the appeal letter she's writing where she takes responsibility for the cheating while explaining how Kevin used that information as a weapon. I read through it and suggest some changes to make her accountability sound more genuine. We spend another hour working on the letter together, which feels strange after months of being enemies. Courtney finally asks if I think we can ever be friends again after everything that happened. I tell her honestly that I don't know because too much damage was done on both sides. She nods and says she feels the same way, but maybe we don't have to stay enemies forever. I offer to write a letter explaining Kevin's manipulation and my role in exposing her cheating as revenge rather than academic integrity. Courtney stares at me like I just spoke another language, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her mouth. She asks why I'd help her after everything that happened between us. I tell her that Kevin wanted us to destroy each other and continuing that destruction means he wins even though he's not here anymore. She sets down her cup and wipes her eyes with a napkin, then nods slowly like she's processing something complicated. We pull out our phones and start making notes about what needs to go in the letter. I write down the timeline of when Kevin started feeding me information about her cheating. Courtney adds details about how he'd been subtly pointing out my supposed fakeness to her for weeks before prom. We work for 2 hours straight, ordering more coffee and filling pages with evidence of manipulation. Every time I write something about my revenge campaign, I feel sick, but Courtney says including those details makes the manipulation more obvious. She shows me texts from Kevin where he encouraged her to make the prom humiliation as public as possible. I show her messages where he sent me links to her copied homework, with helpful suggestions about how to present it to teachers. The pattern becomes clear as we document everything, how Kevin positioned himself perfectly to watch us destroy each other. Courtney writes about their freshman year relationship and how Kevin made her feel inadequate about her appearance. I add notes about how he used those same insecurities against me later. We realize he'd been collecting information and planting seeds for years before executing his plan. The letter grows longer as we include every detail we can remember about his manipulation tactics. Courtney's hands shake when she writes about losing her college acceptance. I have trouble typing when I describe going to the academic review board with evidence. We both acknowledge that even with manipulation, we made choices that hurt each other badly. The letter doesn't excuse what either of us did, just explains the bigger context. By the time we finish, it's almost dinner time and the coffee shop is filling with the evening crowd. Courtney reads through the final version and suggests adding a paragraph about taking responsibility. I agree, and we write about how understanding manipulation doesn't erase consequences. She saves the document to her phone and says she'll send it to the college appeals office tomorrow. I feel exhausted, but also relieved that we documented everything properly. Harmony walks into the coffee shop and spots us at our corner table. She comes over and tells us she's proud of us for trying to work through this instead of staying enemies. Courtney looks surprised to see her because Harmony had been avoiding both of us for weeks. Harmony sits down and admits she almost didn't come to the graduation party because she was tired of the drama between Courtney and me. She orders a tea and explains that watching us fight was exhausting for everyone who cared about us. Now she understands we were both caught in something bigger than a normal friendship conflict. Harmony asks what we're working on, and Courtney shows her the letter we wrote. She reads through it carefully and says the timeline makes Kevin's manipulation obvious. Harmony mentions she noticed Kevin always seemed too helpful during my revenge campaign. She'd thought it was weird how he kept bringing up new things about Courtney right when I was calming down. Courtney tells Harmony about the texts where Kevin coached her before prom. Harmony shakes her head and says she wishes she'd trusted her instincts about Kevin being suspicious. We talk about how good manipulators make everything seem natural until you look back at the pattern. Harmony stays with us for another hour, helping us refine parts of the letter that sound too defensive. Camilla walks past our table on her way to order and does a double take when she sees Courtney. She stops and stands there for a minute like she's deciding something. Then she comes over and tells Courtney she forgives her for spreading the false rumors about pregnancy. Courtney starts crying immediately and tries to apologize. Camilla says learning about Kevin's manipulation helped her understand that Courtney was pushed to eliminate competition. She sits down in the empty chair and explains that she was furious for months about those rumors. The pregnancy lie had spread through the entire school and even reached her parents. Courtney cries harder and apologizes for the damage those rumors caused. She says manipulation doesn't excuse what she actually did to Camilla's reputation. Camilla nods and says she knows, but she also understands there was more happening than she realized. They talk for 20 minutes about how the rumors affected Camilla's life. Courtney listens and doesn't try to defend herself or minimize anything. Camilla eventually says she's working on forgiving, but it's going to take time. Courtney thanks her for even being willing to talk. After Camilla leaves, Courtney puts her head down on the table and cries for a long time. Harmony and I sit with her quietly until she's ready to leave. Over the next 2 weeks, Courtney and I meet several times to process everything that happened. We go back to the same coffee shop because it feels like neutral territory. During our third meeting, we talk about how the competition between us started long before Kevin got involved. I admit I always felt like I had to be perfect because Courtney seemed so naturally smart. She laughs bitterly and says she felt inadequate because my life looked effortless and put together. We both realize we were comparing ourselves constantly instead of actually being friends. Kevin identified that existing tension and exploited it perfectly. He knew we already had complicated feelings about each other that he could twist. Courtney says she started copying my homework because she felt like she could never match my grades honestly. I tell her I spent hours on makeup tutorials because I thought she was naturally prettier. The conversation is painful, but also helps us understand how Kevin's manipulation worked so well. He didn't create our insecurities. He just weaponized feelings that were already there. We talk about how social media made everything worse by letting us constantly compare our lives. Courtney admits she lied about her family's wealth because she felt poor compared to other students. I confess I wore fake eyelashes and extensions because I felt plain next to girls who seemed naturally beautiful. By the end of that meeting, we both understand that our vulnerability to Kevin came from our own issues with ourselves. I tell Courtney about how the prom incident made me feel worthless and desperate to prove I wasn't as fake as she said. Standing there with my eyes swollen and makeup running felt like confirmation that I really was nothing without all the artificial help. Courtney listens and then tells me about how my seemingly perfect life made her feel inadequate and angry at herself. She says seeing me with Kevin at prom triggered years of feeling like she wasn't good enough. We both realized we were vulnerable to Kevin's manipulation because we already had complicated feelings about each other and ourselves. I explained that destroying her college acceptance felt justified because I wanted her to hurt as badly as I did. She says humiliating me at prom felt righteous because she wanted to expose what she saw as my deception. Neither of us understood that Kevin was feeding those feelings and pushing us toward extremes. We talk about how revenge felt good in the moment but left us both worse off. Courtney says losing her college acceptance taught her that consequences can't be undone. I admit that becoming someone who could systematically destroy another person scared me about myself. We spend hours in these conversations, slowly unpacking layers of manipulation and personal responsibility. The more we talk, the more we understand that Kevin's plan worked, because we were already primed to hurt each other. Courtney gets an email from the college appeals office saying they'll review her case. She shows me the message on her phone with shaking hands. The email says they received her appeal letter and supporting documentation. They agree to reconsider her application for the following year if she completes community service and retakes classes she cheated in. Courtney reads it 3 times like she can't believe it's real. It's not the full acceptance she lost, but it's a chance to eventually attend. She starts crying and says she's grateful, but also realistic that some consequences can't be completely undone. I feel relieved that my letter might have helped, even though I know it doesn't fix everything I destroyed. Courtney has to complete 200 hours of community service and retake 4 classes with passing grades. She also needs to write a personal statement about academic integrity. The requirements are strict but fair given what happened. Courtney says she'll do whatever it takes because she wants to earn her way back honestly. We celebrate quietly at the coffee shop with expensive lattes. She thanks me for helping with the letter, even though I was the one who reported her cheating originally. I tell her I'm glad something good might come from this mess eventually. Kevin tries to contact both of us through mutual friends over the next few days. Bryson texts me saying Kevin wants to apologize properly and asks if I'll meet with him. I tell Bryson absolutely not because I'm focused on dealing with the damage rather than giving Kevin more opportunities to manipulate. Courtney gets similar messages from people Kevin is using as intermediaries. She refuses to and tells everyone she's done with Kevin completely. Harmony warns us that Kevin is telling people we're overreacting and being dramatic. He's apparently saying the whole thing was a misunderstanding that we blew out of proportion. Bryson texts again saying Kevin claims he wants to take responsibility for his actions. I respond that if Kevin really wanted to take responsibility, he'd leave us alone instead of trying to force more contact. Courtney blocks Kevin's number and tells his friends to stop passing along messages. Bryson eventually tells us Kevin is planning to attend college across the country in California. The news feels like a relief because distance means less chance of running into him. Courtney says she hopes Kevin gets help, but she doesn't want to be part of that process. I agree, and we both commit to maintaining our boundaries no matter what Kevin tries. The yearbook committee sends Courtney an email asking if she wants to be included in a small section after all. They explain they're creating a page acknowledging that the removal was part of a bigger situation they didn't fully understand. Courtney shows me the email and asks what I think she should do. I tell her it's completely her choice and I'll support whatever she decides. She thinks about it for 2 days before responding to the committee. Courtney decides to stay out of the yearbook anyway, saying it feels more honest given everything that happened. She writes back thanking them for reconsidering, but explaining she'd rather accept the consequences of her actions. The committee responds saying they respect her decision and maturity. I feel guilty because I helped cause that exclusion in the first place. Courtney says she's not staying out because of me, but because she wants to own what she did. She explains that being excluded from the yearbook is a reminder that choices have lasting effects. I respect her choice even though part of me wants to fix everything I broke. Courtney tells me that not everything needs to be fixed. Sometimes consequences are just part of moving forward. As graduation approaches, Courtney and I talk about what our relationship will look like going forward. We meet at a park this time instead of the coffee shop because we need a change of scenery. I ask if she thinks we can ever be best friends again like we were before. She's quiet for a long time before saying she doesn't think so, because too much damage happened. I agree and admit I feel the same way even though it's sad. We both acknowledge that even if Kevin orchestrated everything, we still chose to hurt each other in ways that can't be completely forgiven. Courtney says she needs to be able to trust someone completely to call them her best friend. I understand because I feel the same way about trusting people now. But we also don't want to be enemies anymore because that's what Kevin wanted from the beginning. Being enemies means Kevin's manipulation keeps controlling our lives. We decide on something in between, maybe friends with boundaries or just people who care about each other from a distance. Courtney says she needs time to figure out who she is without competition or comparison. I tell her I need the same thing, space to understand myself without measuring against others. We agree to check in occasionally but not force a friendship that might not be possible. As we walk back to our cars, Courtney says she's glad we at least got to this point instead of staying destroyed by Kevin's plan. We sit in her car outside the coffee shop and talk about what comes next between us. Courtney says she can't go back to being best friends because she needs to trust someone completely before calling them that. I agree and tell her I feel the same way about trusting people now after everything with Kevin. She asks if I think we can be friends at all or if too much damage happened. I think about it for a long time before saying, maybe we can be something in between. Not enemies, but not close either. Courtney nods and says that feels more honest than pretending everything can go back to normal. We agree to check in sometimes and be friendly at the school, but not force a friendship that might not be possible anymore. She tells me she needs space to figure out who she is without comparing herself to other people constantly. I understand because I need the same thing. Time to know myself without measuring against others or trying to prove anything. As we get out of the car, Courtney says she's glad we at least got to this point instead of staying destroyed by Kevin's plan forever. I tell her I'm glad too because being enemies would mean Kevin kept winning even after we knew the truth. At graduation practice the next week, the prom coordinator walks over while we're standing in line alphabetically. She pulls us aside near the gym doors and says she's been worried about us since the eyelash incident at prom. Courtney and I look at each other before I explain what we learned about Kevin manipulating everything. The coordinator's face changes from concerned to sad as we tell her how Kevin planned the whole thing to hurt both of us. She says she's not surprised because she's seen students manipulate each other before, but never quite so deliberately over such a long time. Courtney asks if she noticed anything wrong that night at prom. The coordinator says Kevin seemed too calm during the whole incident, like he was watching a show instead of defending his girlfriend. She wishes she'd trusted her instincts and pulled me aside to ask more questions. I tell her it's not her fault because Kevin fooled everyone, including us. She gives us both a hug and says she's proud we're working through it instead of staying angry. Before she walks away, she tells us that graduation will be a fresh start, and we should both be proud of getting through senior year, despite everything. That afternoon, Melody finds me in my room packing up old school papers. She sits on my bed and says she's proud of how I've handled everything since the truth came out about Kevin. I ask what she means because I don't feel like I've handled anything well. Melody explains that I'm taking responsibility for my choices, while also recognizing Kevin manipulated me when I was hurt. She says it would be easy to blame everything on him and act like I had no choice. I tell her I still feel guilty for destroying Courtney's college acceptance and her reputation at the school. Melody says feeling guilty means I understand what I did was wrong, which is better than making excuses. She reminds me that she saw me at my worst during the revenge campaign, celebrating every time something bad happened to Courtney. I cringe remembering how happy I felt when the academic review board revoked Courtney's acceptance. Melody says the fact that I cringe now shows I've changed and learned something from this mess. Her support means everything because she could easily judge me for what I did. She tells me that growing up means owning your mistakes even when someone else pushed you toward them. I spend 2 hours that night writing an apology letter to the academic review board. I explain that I reported Courtney's cheating as a weapon in personal revenge, rather than genuine concern about academic integrity. The words are hard to write because I have to admit I use their processes to hurt someone on purpose. I tell them about Kevin's manipulation, but make clear that doesn't excuse what I chose to do. After reading it 3 times, I email the letter before I can change my mind. The next morning, I get a response from the board chair saying they appreciate my honesty. They explain that the cheating was still real and required consequences regardless of my motivations. I understand that my reasons for reporting it being wrong doesn't change that Courtney actually copied my homework for 2 years. The board chair says they're glad I'm learning about the weight of my actions and the importance of using official processes for the right reasons. Reading their response makes me feel slightly better, but doesn't erase what I did. Courtney texts me that she's writing apology letters to all the girls she spread rumors about. She asks if I think she should mention Kevin's manipulation, or just take full responsibility. I tell her to do whatever feels most honest to her situation. She decides to mention Kevin's influence, but make clear she still chose to spread the rumors and hurt people. Over the next few days, she sends individual letters to each girl explaining what happened and apologizing for the damage. Most of them respond with varying levels of warmth, some more forgiving than others. Camilla texts both of us saying she accepts Courtney's apology and understands manipulation doesn't erase harm, but provides context. The girl who dumped chocolate milk on Courtney's head sends a message saying she regrets that reaction now that she knows the full story. She apologizes for the public humiliation, even though Courtney hurt her first with false pregnancy rumors. Courtney shows me all the responses and cries reading them because she didn't expect anyone to forgive her. I remind her that forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to normal, just that people are willing to move forward. 2 days before graduation, I'm in my room studying when my mom calls up the stairs. She says someone is at the door asking for me. I walk downstairs and see my dad blocking the doorway with his body. Through the gap, I spot Kevin standing on our porch trying to explain something. My dad's voice is firm as he tells Kevin to leave and never come back to our house. Kevin tries to argue that he just wants to apologize and make things right. My dad says Kevin had months to apologize and chose to keep manipulating instead. Through the window, I watch Kevin gesture desperately while my dad stands completely still. Kevin points at me and tries to make eye contact, but my dad steps forward and blocks his view. After 5 minutes of arguing, Kevin finally walks back to his car and drives away. My dad closes the door and asks if I'm okay. I tell him thank you for protecting me because I don't trust myself not to listen if Kevin tries to manipulate me again. My mom hugs me and says they won't let Kevin near me until I'm ready, which might be never. I feel grateful my parents understand that Kevin is dangerous, even though he never physically hurt anyone. Bryson sends a group text to Courtney and me saying Kevin has been posting on social media at his new college. He screenshots some posts where Kevin talks about having a crazy ex-girlfriend who turned his friends against him. The posts make it sound like he's the victim of our drama instead of the person who created it. Courtney texts back asking if we should message people at his new school to tell them the truth. I think about it, but then write that we should let it go because we're done letting Kevin control our energy and attention. Bryson agrees and says Kevin will probably show his true colors eventually, without our help. Courtney says some people will believe his version, and we have to accept that we can't control everyone's opinion. I know she's right, even though it bothers me that Kevin gets to pretend he did nothing wrong. Bryson tells us Kevin's roommate already thinks he's weird because Kevin keeps trying to get involved in other people's conflicts. We decide to block Kevin on all social media and stop checking what he posts about us. On graduation day, I arrive at the school early to get my cap and gown. Courtney is already there in line and waves me over. We stand together by choice instead of our alphabetical assignments being anywhere near each other. Other students notice and whisper, but nobody says anything directly to us. When they call my name, I walk across the stage to genuine applause from people who know what we've been through. Courtney's name gets called 3 people later, and she receives the same warm applause. It feels like a small acknowledgement that we survived something difficult and came out better than we could have. After the ceremony, we take a picture together in our caps and gowns. My mom cries taking the photo because she didn't think we'd ever be in the same picture again. Courtney's mom stands next to mine and they talk quietly about how proud they are. I don't hear what they say, but I see both of them wiping their eyes. Our families end up in the same area of the parking lot after the ceremony. Courtney's parents walk over and her mom thanks mine for the letter I wrote supporting Courtney's college appeal. My mom says it was the right thing to do after learning about Kevin's manipulation. My dad tells Courtney's parents he's sorry for what I did to make a bad situation worse. Courtney's dad says they appreciate the apology and they're sorry for what Courtney did at prom that started everything. The conversation is awkward but honest, which feels right for where we all are now. Courtney and I stand slightly apart from our parents. Not quite together, but not separate either. Melody takes another picture of all of us and says she's keeping it as proof that people can choose to grow instead of staying angry forever. That night at Harmony's graduation party, she stands on a chair and asks everyone to be quiet for a toast. She talks about friendship surviving manipulation and choosing to grow instead of staying enemies. Harmony doesn't name anyone specifically, but everyone knows she's talking about Courtney and me. She says the best revenge against people who try to destroy your relationships is refusing to stay destroyed. People clap and several come up afterward to talk to us. A girl from our history class says Kevin tried to turn her against her best friend sophomore year by telling each of them fake things the other supposedly said. A guy from the soccer team says Kevin convinced him his girlfriend was cheating by showing edited text messages. As more people share their stories, we realize Kevin manipulated way more situations than we knew about. Courtney squeezes my hand and whispers that at least we're not alone in falling for his act. I squeeze back and agree that knowing his pattern was bigger than just us makes it slightly easier to forgive ourselves for not seeing through him sooner. Courtney and I end up at the coffee shop 3 days later to talk about what comes next. She's heading to a state school in Arizona that gave her a second chance after the community college acceptance, and I'm going to a university in Oregon that's about as far from here as I can get. We sit across from each other with our drinks getting cold while we figure out how to stay in touch without forcing something that might not work. She pulls out her phone and we follow each other on social media, but we both know we're probably not going to check in much once real college life starts. The distance feels like a natural way to let things fade without either of us having to decide to end a friendship that's already been destroyed and rebuilt into something fragile. She says she hopes I do well and make good friends who don't manipulate me, and I tell her the same thing. We hug in the parking lot, and it feels like closing a chapter that needed to end, even though we survived it together. When I drive away, I don't feel sad or relieved, just aware that some relationships do their important work and then naturally end. A month passes, and I'm sitting in a therapist's office because my mom insisted I talk to someone before starting college. Doctor. The therapist's name is Dr. Kirk, and she has this calm way of asking questions that makes me actually want to answer honestly, instead of just saying I'm fine. I tell her about the prom incident and the revenge campaign and Kevin's manipulation, and she listens without judging any of it. She helps me understand that I can take responsibility for choosing to destroy Courtney's college acceptance, while also recognizing that Kevin manipulated me when I was hurt and angry. Both things are true at the same time, and that's confusing but also real. Dr. Kirk says accepting that kind of complexity is part of growing up and learning that people aren't just good or bad. She asked me what I learned about myself through all of this, and I have to think hard about that question. I learned I'm capable of being really cruel when I'm hurt, and I learned I can be manipulated if someone knows the right buttons to push. But I also learned I can recognize when I'm wrong and try to fix it even when fixing it is hard and uncomfortable. Dr. Kirk says those lessons will serve me well if I remember them and don't just push them away because they're painful. We schedule weekly sessions for the rest of the summer, and I leave feeling like maybe I can actually work through this instead of just carrying it around forever. 2 weeks into therapy, my phone buzzes with a text from Courtney. She got accepted to the community college program, and she's retaking all the classes she cheated in, doing the actual work this time. She says it's really hard and kind of embarrassing to be in basic classes with people younger than her, but it also feels good to earn grades she can actually be proud of. I text back that I'm proud of her for doing it the right way, instead of staying bitter about what she lost. She sends back a smiley face and says she hopes therapy is helping me figure things out. We text a few more times over the next couple weeks, just checking in about college prep and summer jobs, nothing deep. It's weird having this careful friendship with someone who used to be my best friend, and then my enemy, and now is something in between. But it works for where we both are right now, and that feels okay. I'm scrolling through social media one night when I see a post from someone at Kevin's college. Kevin got kicked out after only 2 months for creating drama between his roommates, apparently convincing each of them that the other was stealing and talking behind their back. The post has screenshots of messages where Kevin is clearly lying to both roommates about what the other one supposedly said. Part of me feels happy that he's facing consequences and other people are seeing what he really is. But mostly I just feel sad that he's doing the same manipulative stuff to new people who don't know to watch out for him. I hope eventually he gets in enough trouble that he has to actually change, but I also know that's not my problem to solve or my responsibility to worry about. I close the app and don't look at any more posts about him because I'm done letting Kevin take up space in my head. As I'm packing boxes for college, I find the false eyelashes from prom at the bottom of my desk drawer. I'd saved them as a reminder of what Courtney did, proof of the humiliation I felt that night. I hold them in my hand and remember how my eyes burned when she ripped them off, how everyone stared while I cried, how small and worthless I felt standing there with my makeup running. The anger feels distant now, like something that happened to a different version of me. I walk to the kitchen and throw the eyelashes in the trash, not dramatically or ceremonially, just tossing them away because I don't need them anymore. The humiliation was real, and the revenge was real, and the manipulation was real, and all of that is part of my story now. But it's not the whole story, and it's not the end of the story. I'm choosing to move forward with all of it as something that happened and shaped me, but doesn't define everything I am or will be. My first day of college arrives, and I'm standing in my dorm room meeting my roommate for the first time. Her name is Sarah, and she seems nice, talking about her high school friends and her major and asking about mine. I feel nervous about trusting a new friend after everything with Kevin and Courtney, worried I'll miss warning signs or let myself get manipulated again. But I also know I learned important lessons about recognizing when someone is playing games with my emotions and taking responsibility for my own choices. Sarah asks if I want to go to dinner with her and some people from down the hall, and I say yes, even though part of me wants to stay safe and isolated. I'm not the same person who got her eyelashes ripped off at prom anymore. I'm someone who experienced real pain and caused real pain and is working every day to be better than both versions of myself. That's going to have to be enough as I figure out who I'm becoming next.